I wanted to read this article from Harper's Magazine. Um, there might be some copyright in it, but I just wanted to read it because I think if you haven't subscribed to Harper's Magazine, I highly suggest it. You won't always agree with everything that they write, but if you are a person who likes to read, uh, getting a Harper's Magazine, because you won't get it as much as the New Yorker, because New Yorker I have a hard time keeping up with because it's weekly, or you get like 50 issues a year, so almost weekly. It can be daunting to keep up with. If you like the intelligence of the New Yorker, but you cannot keep up with the capacity of the New Yorker, like if it's just too much work to keep up with New Yorker, highly suggest Harper's Magazine because they have the same intelligence as the New Yorker. Um, Also, if you like the New Yorker, maybe the Atlantic would be kind of more of your. That's more. I see the Atlantic as kind of more pretentious, but Harper's is kind of up that same alley as New Yorker. Um, Not Harper Bazaar, Harper's Magazine. There's a difference. There's Harper's and there's Harper's Bazaar. So harpers.org. Um, but there's this article called that was in the archives called The Pleasures of Reading by Louis Lapham. Um, and I wanted to read it. On first opening a book, I listened for the sound of the human voice. Instead of looking for signs, I form an impression of tone, and if I can hear in that tone the harmonies of the human improvisation extended through 5,000 years of space and time, then I read the book. By this device, I am absolved from reading most of what is published in a given year. I have found that few writers learn to speak in that human voice, that most of them make use of alien codes, academic, political, literary, bureaucratic, technical, in which they send messages already deteriorating into their half-life of yesterday's news. Their transmissions seem to be incomprehensible unless I must decipher them. For professional reasons, I am content to let them pass by. Too many subtle voices divert my attention to the point of where I entered a bookstore, I am besieged by the same sense of imminent discovery that follows me through seaports and capital cities. This restlessness never troubles me in libraries, probably because libraries to me are like museums. It is the guile of commerce that accounts for the foreboding in bookstores. I have a feeling of marketplace of ideas still current after 2,000 years, of old men earning passage money by telling tales of what was the city of Antioch, sorry. The murmurings of these voices often reduce me to a state of hesitation in which I cannot choose between opposite directions, nor is it any easier on those days when I have the capacity for decision. I feel the sudden compulsion to buy as many books as I can carry, everything from the complete works of Trollope to German translations of The Golden Bough. As I have grown older, the impulse towards recklessness has become stronger rather than weaker, with the result that I have obliged to impose minor disciplines. I haven't the strength of character to buy only one book on a single afternoon, and so I permit myself to two, counting works of 2 or 3 volumes as one book. And as a defense against profligacy, I'm not sure what that means. I no longer buy cloth-bound books unless forced into it, and even among paperbacks I make distinctions. I try to avoid shoddier imprints and will search for several months if I know that a title has been published by Anchor, New Directions, or the Penguin Classics. The pleasure that I take in the Penguin volumes, this is in 1975, so the pleasure I take in the Penguin volumes has a quality of sensual obsession that other men confine to porcelain or polished woods. It is a pleasure that derives from the weight of the paper and the way the pages fall under the hand, from the typeface's particularly monotone Garamond to the monotone Bembo, to the clarity of design that seems to achieve a precise balance between substance and grace. It also has something to do with the grandeur of the publishing conception that attempts an entire history of man's wandering inland from the Jurassic Sea. I can think of no other publishing house that offers not only the more familiar roster of authors from Homer through Joyce, but also the works of Exquemelin, Zarate, Basho. I am so slaughtering all of these. Pausanias, and Notker the Stammerer. As a result of my addiction to the Penguin Classics, I have rearranged my library for what I hope to be the last time. Whereas in earlier periods, I divided into the most controversial parts, fiction and nonfiction, alphabetically by author, by nationalities, by literary genre, alphabetically by subject. I now have arranged it in a chronology that follows a sequence of the author's date of birth. Ooh. This gives me a sense of the distance traveled and allows me to remember that John Bunyan was born in the same decade as Molière and that of Livy, despite his belief in the old pieties belonging to a generation later than that of Catullus. Catullus. My habits of reading are as random as me buying of books. I cannot read without a pencil in my hand, or books that I like to discover marginalia 10 and 20 years out of date, much as revised at intervals of 2 and 3 years to accord in the shifting images of myself. And the addition of Flaubert's Sentimental Education, I find a scribbled note in I take to be my handwriting at the age of 19, a note subsequently crossed out and contradicted by the remark, foolishly romantic. Usually I read 3 or 4 books at the same time, preferably by authors of different centuries. I read 3 or 4 books at the same time too. I've got like 5 that I'm reading right now, including an audiobook. I'm reading Wicked right now. It sometimes happens that I find myself reading different periods of history in the same landscape. Herodotus and T. Lawrence on the rivers of Mesopotamia, George Orwell and Sam Johnson on the treachery of London. And when this effect is compounded by the superimposition of marginalia reaching across 20 years in cities as unlike one another and as Chicago and Rangoon, I begin to understand the analogy between music and what modern physicists have in mind when they try to describe the continuum of space and time. I know what that's like, yes, because you're like going across all of time and space. Oh my goodness, I understand. As a student and later observant of the avant-garde, I feel obliged to finish every book that I undertook to begin. This I no longer do. If within the first few pages of a text I cannot hear the harmonic tonality in the author's voice, no matter if he promises to introduce me to the court of Sirius or the inner councils of the Democratic Party, I abandon him at the first opportunity. I do this with the authors of great reputation, preferring to blame myself for whatever fault can be assigned, and so to pass on an author in which the company I feel the warmth of recognition. After some years, I return to the author of the great reputation and hope that I have learned enough to appreciate his greatness. When I was 20, I could not read Aldous Huxley. By the time I was 30, I could no longer read Herman Hesse or F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yeah. Right now I can't read Jane Eyre. I can't read Jane Eyre anymore. I used to be able to read Jane Eyre and I can't read it anymore. I don't count myself as a literary critic, which relieves me of the necessity to make judgments or form consistent opinions. I can contradict myself without apology or embarrassment, and within a period of months I can declare a former enthusiasm inoperative. I look for writers with whom I can imagine myself holding a conversation, who have seen enough of the world to remark on its wonders and vanities without bemoaning the loss of their youthful illusions. It's for this reason I prefer the ancient writers, or those among the moderns, modern being defined as no later than 1924, who have survived the winnowing of time and misfortune of the inept translation. I seek an understanding of the character of man, so I don't care whether the author chooses Paris of 1845 or President Washington for his mise en scène. It goes on, but I think I'll just end there. The article is on harpers.org, so definitely go check that out. But I just wanted to read kind of a snippet about the pleasures of reading, and I thought that this brings you well, and I hope that you find some pleasure in reading. And go subscribe to Harper's Magazine. Okay, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you on the next one.